Welcome to Pro Mindset Podcast today. This is your host, Craig Domann. I've got a special guest, Dr. Amber Selking. Amber is a jack of all trades. She's a former athlete. She's a performance coach. She's an author, speaker, been a TEDx talker. She's a mindset expert. And I think the best thing about you that I've known in the 2 minutes that we had before we started the podcast was, you just have this spirit of like, I just want to help people. So Welcome to Pro Mindset today.
Thanks so much, Craig. I'm excited to be with you and just grateful for all the work that you do in terms of connecting people and ideas and helping people be their best. So it'll be a fun conversation with us today.
Okay, so you're a Golden Domer. You have Think Like a Champion behind you. You were a soccer girl, and you maintained that affiliation with the football coach. Coach Kelly, who's down in LSU. Walk us through your story of how you discovered that mindset was going to be your mission.
Good question. I was blessed to be raised in a family that I think believed in the power of positive thinking and hard work and discipline and consistency. And so that got integrated into my life at a very, very young age through various mechanisms. My family had McDonald's franchises, so I saw the type of hard work and sacrifice that it takes to own your own business, and the collaboration that it took between my mom and dad to grow that organization. I grew up raising lambs and pigs out in the country. And so, working animals out and feeding them before and after school every day is just a labor of consistency. Then I was a soccer player, and so that journey took me to Notre Dame as an athlete. And it was always interesting because I was never the best player physically or technically or tactically, but I could work really hard. So physically, I was always one of the most fit and strongest players. And then mentally, I knew that I could mentally out tough most anyone. And so I didn't even really know that sports psychology was a thing back in the day, but I knew that was part of my competitive advantage. And so, then I went and worked in corporate America, and it was there that I realized it was a very similar dynamic that I experienced in soccer, right? In sports, you have people that might be more technically, physically gifted than you are, but if you outwork them, then you could actually outperform them. And so I saw the same in business. People that were maybe really gifted naturally in their craft, whether that was accounting or finance or supply chain, but they didn't love it. They didn't apply themselves. And then conversely, people that maybe weren't as naturally gifted, but applied themselves and just continued to raise in the ranks. And that's really what started me asking the question of, well, what really goes into human high performance? And can I understand this more than just sort of through the osmosis and development that my mom and dad provided for me? And that's what led me to, a master's and a PhD in applied sport and human performance psychology, which is just a lot of words to say, how does our brain work? How does it impact how we show up? And then what are tools and strategies that we can use to train our brain, just like we train our bodies, like we train our craft?
Let's start with what you just said there. How does our brain work? Let's take it from an athletic perspective. You show up on the field, it's a tryout, it's your first time seeing the coaches, first time them seeing you, first time you seeing your potential teammates, and perhaps it's a setting where not everybody's going to make the team. And you recognize right away that you might not have the most giftedness physically. That may not be the tallest, the fastest, the strongest, those type of things. That happens all the time in every sport.
Mm-hmm.
How does the mind work in that situation? I'm sure it works the same way all the time, but in that situation where your circumstances are not necessarily lining up with what you were hoping.
Yeah. So what we know from a sports psych standpoint is this really simple process that we actually start every mental training session that with the teams and individuals that I work with, but also when I give keynotes for corporations, it's on the screen and I have the audience say it with me because it's so fundamentally critical to how we show up as human beings. So what we know is that our thoughts affect our emotions. our emotions affect our physiological response. And physio just means your body's response, right? So things like your heart rate, your muscle tension, your visual field actually expands and constricts on this process. Your hormones change on this process. And ultimately, how our bodies are going to determine our performance in the moment, right? And so in this specific setting, if we can think about the right things, then it will help us generate right emotions, which will help get our bodies in the right place to deliver our best. And so, thoughts start the process, and we get to control our thoughts. And that is, often profound for people to really wrap their head around, is that, wow, I do get to choose what I think about and how I think about things. And so fundamentally, sports psychology is just learning to think right in any situation. I got my PhD under Dr. Rick McGuire, who is a sort of a grandfather in the field of sports psychology. He was the head track and field coach at Mizzou for 37 years, started the USA track and field sports psychology program. And he, always says that the enemy is distraction. It's not the other team. It's not the weather. It's not the environment. It's distraction. And so if we can help individuals understand, where do I need to place my attention on the right things at the right time, and therefore think about things in a right way that will create that right emotion, which will generate that right physiological response. That's how we manage situations like that. So when you go in and you're thinking about maybe the lack of talent you have, or the you don't know the coaches, and you notice that a couple players over there are sort of all talking to each other and seems like they've played together on a team before, and so might have better chemistry. If that's what you're thinking about, emotionally, you start to get nervous, start to get a little scared, start to question and doubt yourself. Physiologically, heart rate starts to go up, muscle tension starts to increase, cortisol, which is your stress hormone, goes up, testosterone, which is your power hormone, starts to go down. And so we haven't positioned ourselves to be successful in that moment. So I would really challenge individuals to, okay, what makes you great as a competitor, as an athlete in your skill? Look around. Who are the people that look like they're open to connecting? Like, grab somebody and start passing the ball, or doing a warm up together, and get yourself, sort of shrink the game a little bit and really start engaging in the things that lead you to be great. And if it's a, pass and shoot drill, well, pass and move off the ball. And I'm thinking soccer right now. So pass, move off the ball, receive it, and take the shot. Don't allow your thoughts to go to all the other things that might play into that, And so I would say that's one of the most simple and profound ways, I think, that we can understand how our brain works to impact how we deliver in the moment.
I don't have a master's or a PhD. I just have 33 years of representing NFL guys as my laboratory to
Incredible.
analyze why guys that don't get drafted end up playing a decade. And guys that get drafted in the first round sometimes play 2 to 3 years. And they get multiple opportunities, and teams keep waiting for them to flip on the switch. But here's how I'm gonna share with you my framework on
I love it.
thoughts, and I want you to diagnose it for me. I feel like we have a pie, and the pie has 4 pieces. And this is thinking now. We have our now thoughts, which is where you want to be. Mm-hmm. You have your distractions, which are most of the time contemporary and future thoughts. What you're going to do to celebrate after you win the game, or after you make the team, or what you're going to do with your partner tonight, or what movie you're going to watch, and all those kind of distractions. But the 2 deadly ones are invisible. And I feel like they lie in your subconscious. And it's your past failures, disappointments, mistakes, self-sabotage, all the things that we do to each other, or to ourselves. Like, you didn't get enough sleep the last time you went to a trial. So this time you're like, I hope I got enough sleep. You didn't eat breakfast. Your mom and dad told you to eat breakfast. You didn't eat breakfast. And then you ran out of gas, and you're like, I don't want. So that doesn't happen again until you feel hunger pains. In the middle of the workout, you're like, oh, I didn't eat enough. Oh, I didn't sleep enough. I'm tired. And the other one is harmful or hurtful comments that you've attached to, that you've allowed to live rent-free in your mind, that you don't even know that are living there. They're squatters. You don't know they're living there until they are. And it only shows up when the coach says, Amber, you and Craig, it's down to one spot. It's between you two. And we're going to have a shootout. You're each going to get 5 shots. Whoever makes the most makes the team. In that moment, Amber goes to, oh, my dad said this one day when he was frustrated with his McDonald's business and his employees were crazy. And he said something to me like, hey, you're never going to blah, blah, blah. And he forgot about it literally 5 seconds later. And so did you. Until that moment. Or my dad, it's usually dads, did it too, to me. So my question to you is, when you talk about distractions to me can be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But the things that hurt NFL players the most, the final 2 weeks before cuts, are those invisible ones. They are smart enough not to deal with girls and money and friends. No, I'm going to be focused, but it's the thing their 7th grade coach told them.
Yeah, it's so good. And so, thoughts are really important because they start that process, like I just mentioned. But thoughts are really, really important because those repeated thoughts are what build mindsets, right? And a mindset is an actual protein pattern that gets wired into your brain and changes the form and function of how your brain operates. And so I tell my guys that like a mindset's just like an Instagram filter, right? You could have one picture, and if it has a black and white filter over it, that picture looks totally different than if you have a lo-fi filter over it. And so to your point, when those moments, let's say a pressure moment, have you built mindsets or have you had repeated thoughts that, man, pressure's where I get great. I love this shit. Like that kind of thought? Or did you have that one coach or that one moment where in your past you didn't handle pressure well? So now all of a sudden you start thinking, ugh, I'm not great under pressure. I just and the thing is with elite players, like guys in the NFL, they're good enough that most of their lives, they've been able to be better than needing to be their best in high pressure moments. Right. And so when they actually come into a high pressure moment, now that's almost uncharted territory. And if they have that one experience or that one comment from somebody that maybe a teacher said it about, oh, you just have test anxiety, like it's no big deal. But now all of a sudden that could come back like, well, this is test anxiety and I have that, and it's that sort of, what you just mentioned, the intangible mindset that gets in there that can alter how people operate. And so it's funny, like when I prep guys for pro day, we'll be doing all this mindset stuff, and it's about building like solid, aggressive, confident, poised, present mindsets. And to your point, about 2 weeks out, I asked them the question, okay, what could go wrong? And they look at you like, excuse me? We've just been working on how awesome I'm going to be. And I'm like,
absolutely
correct. But the reality of it is something's going to come at you that you haven't thought about that is going to trigger something subconsciously, to your point, and we have to be ready for it. And so we really need to think about and go back and think about moments where you've tripped up or where you've undermined and self-sabotaged, to your point. And let's dissect that a little bit. And can we understand, well, who made that comment to you? Oh, to your point, your junior high football coach that you haven't talked to in 10 years. We can't let him control you,
And he learned, I just want to interject. He learned how to coach football from the internet. He didn't even play football. Somebody had to coach football. So I picked him, and he never played it himself. And you're allowing that person to influence your pro day? Continue.
100%. Period. I love it.
Well, here's the thing that I have learned is if you can be your best in your biggest moments, you can be your best all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody. So what I see in the NFL is that there are these like critical career-defining moments. Pro day is a career-defining moment. It's a series of moments, but it's that moment. Combine, your first mini camp, how you show up at your first preseason game. How do you show up right before final cuts? especially when they throw you in when you weren't thinking you were going to play, or when before you
Mhm.
thought you were going to play, or play more than you thought you were going to play. And so what I find is that the beautiful thing about mindset is it's very similar to um, the heat. They talk about the heat in the kitchen. Can you handle the heat in the kitchen?
Mhm.
Well, what does that symbolize? It symbolizes a fire. A fire reveals your true identity.
Amen.
Just right. And so the bigger the moment, the hotter the fire, the more you show who you are. And one of the failures that I believe that NFL teams struggle with, challenge they struggle with, they can't simulate fire before they draft
Mhm.
somebody. They think the combine is fire. No, it's not. Being grilled by 10 people in a room is not that big a deal. Getting out there and running a 40 is not that big a deal. These guys are trained professionals. They've been coached up by very high level people to do exactly what they're going to do.
Mhm.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I fundamentally in my theory of performance excellence is it starts with identity, to your point, because if you really don't know who you are, you just sort of rise and fall on the outcomes that are happening, right? And that's what you start to see in guys. They're very emotional. And like when they're playing well, they're confident and they got a swag about them and they have a good attitude at practice and they're, an energizer on the team. And then they have a bad game or they don't get as many reps as they think they deserve, or the coach isn't talking to them. And it might not be for any reason other than the coach is struggling with something, but they internalize that. And so then all of a sudden they go MIA, or they're late to the training room, or, they're half asleep in meetings, or they just pissy, and they bring that energy. And so one of the things that I noticed, the difference between working with college players and pro guys, and I'm curious your take on this, and this is historically because the college game is changing with NIL and the transfer portal,
Portal.
but in college, I feel like guys, they get to explore their identity because they come in and they know I got 3 to 5 years to be here and figure it out. And so they sort of have this space and this stable environment where they can grow. But in the NFL, it is so unstable, and like they need to know who they are right now, or else it consumes them in so many different ways. And I just couldn't agree more that that identity piece is so important, both for the player and for the organization, to understand really who are you getting and how does this person handle stress and handle failure and handle success. And so I know that there's a lot of assessments out there that can be used and done, and I think those are really good and helpful. And I think as many as you can do. I mean, there's sort of like a puzzle that you start to put together to understand what you're getting in a person, and then as the person, how am I going to respond to that? Because if then you have a choice, right? Like if you're aware of, hey, in these moments, I tend to act like X. Well, then when those moments come up, you can start to be aware of, hey, I got to make a choice right now. Am I going to shut down and retreat, or am I going to attack? I mean, my personality type, when I feel like someone's coming at me, I either attack or I say it's not even worth it. And I just totally disengage. And neither of those is helpful. So if I can come to the middle and be balanced and be thoughtful and maintain my aggression, but not attack, I think it's a healthier space. And that's really, I think, a powerful tool for individuals when, to your point, they find themselves in the heat.
Amber, you said a lot there. I'm gonna take a second here and respond to a couple of those concepts. One
Yeah.
is the whole idea, and keep in mind that college football is becoming more like pro football every
Mm-hmm.
single day. But there's a distinctive difference. And the difference is in college, you can redshirt. You can
Mm-hmm.
show up on campus, and yes, they want you to show their best, be ready, show what you got, be ready, and maybe contribute early. But they've always can play the redshirt card. And the team can say, hey man, figure it out, get bigger, stronger, faster, learn the playbook, whatever the weakness is, and be ready to go in spring ball. So there's this cushion that you have between being in the locker room and being on the streets, going home. Where in the pros, every player, except for the guys that are signing these mega contracts with multiple year guarantees, every player, regardless of what the contract says, they are effectively signing a one-day contract. I have a son that plays for the Tennessee Titans. He's already on his second team. He's going into his third season. He has a one-day contract.
Yeah.
And when you have a one-day contract, they can let you go, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, go see the GM, turn in your playbook or turn in your iPad any day, any time. I've had a guy cut on an away game at the team hotel an hour before they were going over to the stadium.
Wow.
And while the team was playing the game, he's on the flight back home. And he had 35 family members going to the game.
Ugh.
Because it was real close to his hometown. So the bottom line is that constant scrutiny in the NFL, it's a grind. And it wears people down. And they don't always, it's very similar to, like a Tesla or a normal car. You got to go to the gas station and get gassed up. You got to get recharged. For those players that don't know how to recharge their mind, it's only a matter of time before they get weak.
Yeah.
And they become vulnerable. And their true identity shows up.
Yep.
Okay. And then the second thing and the final thing I want to mention in response to what you shared, mindset is a pattern of thinking. And it's really secondary to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the context of pro mindset, it's really about what is your story? Amber, your story is your story, but what is your story? Your story is your story. And I'm going to substitute words in there for story. Your past dictates your present, but what is your future?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people, 95% of their thoughts are the same they had yesterday, and it's their past. They're living now in their past.
Yeah.
And what is their future? For most people, it's still going to be their past. Right?
Absolutely.
So I have three concepts that I focus on for rewriting your story. One is winning your mental battles.
Mm-hmm.
Mental battles, we already talked about. That's the pie. That's the four things. You've got to win there.
Yes.
And to do it, you've got to do it. You have to have an excavation process where you really understand and you have awareness and consciousness of what you're thinking in the heat of the moment. Most people don't. They just come off the field and they go, my bad.
I love that. Yes, it was. Why? And how do we fix it?
Yeah. Like, why did it happen? I mean, it's like the coach wanted you to take the shot because you have the strongest leg or the best shooting accuracy if you're in basketball, depending on what it is. And you screwed up. But it wasn't because of a lack of ability or talent. It was because of your thought life that was with you that you didn't need to have with you. So you win your mental battles. The second one is you have to own your worth. The systemic problem I see in sports is that players don't understand the difference between belief and confidence. And I've started my own school of mindset in terms of the idea that belief is how much you love yourself. God created you perfectly imperfect. He designed you perfectly imperfect. And there's never been someone like you, and there's never going to be another woman like you. But you're imperfect. But you're perfect. Can you understand that? And some people can, some people can't. So imperfection is not in the design. Imperfection's in the performance.
Yes.
We're designed perfectly, but we perform imperfectly.
You know, to that point, I have this really cool visual that I saw and now that I use, is I was, and I did it with a group of high school girls here in South Bend. I went and gave a talk to them on their little character day. And I had a $20 bill and I was like, who wants this $20 bill? And all of them were like, oh, me. Right. And I said, okay. And then I tore the 20 bill in half and they were like, and then I tore it again. And then I tore it again. And then I tore it again.
They're like, no.
And then I dropped it on the floor and I stood on it and I said, who wants this? Who wants this now? And they're all like, well, I do. I mean, I'll just tape it back together. It's a $20 bill. It's worth $20. And I said, this is who we are as women, you know, in the world, and who you are as a young woman. Like, you have value inherently because of who you are and how you've been created. And we're going to go through things in life that's going to tear us, that is going to hurt us, that we might get stepped on. And yet you still wanted this $20 bill. And so remember that when you go through this in life, you still have the same value. We just have to put it back together a little bit. And that's okay. And I just think that, to your point, to help people really understand, like, that you have that value, and how you think about it and how you recreate yourself and understand yourself in those moments, despite the past, is really, really important. So I love how you're talking about that.
Well, one thing I would say is, when it comes down to the hottest fires for NFL players coming down to final cuts, belief in themselves really influences everything. Influences how people see them, feel them, trust them, like them, want them, all those types of things. And it's really the defining factor. It's if you and I are similar in ability, similar in skill set, similar in health and in cost, if they don't even know it, but if they think you believe in you more than I do, believe in me, they don't know why they're making the decision, but they're going with Amber. And they're having those final meetings and like, it's just a gut feeling. I think Amber's ready. I think she's ready for the big moment. I don't think Craig is. And it's all about belief.
Yeah. So good.
And then the last one about your story is, you have to plug into your purpose. And if you don't know what your mission is, your purpose is, you don't know who you are. And when you've dealt with you reframed your past, and you are 100% believer in who you are, and you're plugged into your purpose, now you're rock solid with your story and your identity. Now we can go do something. You want to talk about your systems, your practice, we can do that now. But guess what? We need to do all those things, and we need to perform on stage, on the field, so that we can discover what our issues are.
That's so good. I love it. I love it.
Okay. I'm going to share one other part of it. The story is connected to the stage with your standards.
That's good.
And the number one standard I'm finding that people struggle with is they can't keep the most important promises to themselves. I struggle with it too. And so I can show up for a client, I can show up for a friend, but not all the time do I show up for myself. And so that's why you see sometimes coaches, they struggle sometimes promises to themselves. It's easy. That's why, it's easier to coach than it is to do it. That's why they love coaching.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about keeping a promise, keeping the most important promises to yourself.
Yeah. It's hard because I feel like when we're playing or competing or trying to be the best, like, we're selfish in our time and our efforts and our intensity. But then all of a sudden you transition into the parent, the teacher, the coach, and you're in this sort of really obvious servant, this role where you're helping others. And so it's so easy then to just be like, I can't spend any time on myself, because then that means I'm not as good as I should be for all the other people that I'm trying to be about and help. And I just think that that has to be a mindset, that we shift of, and the same is kind of true with athletes, like with recovery. I try to get them to understand recovery is not something you do when you're hurt or when you're tired or when you're sore. Like champions understand that recovery is part of the performance process, like as a coach, exercising, sleeping, eating right. This is part of being a great coach. That doesn't make you selfish. That doesn't make you mean you're spending less time for everybody else. And as if you deplete yourself, you don't have anything to pour out to everyone else. And so I think coaches and I think really struggle with that of, they've got a training room right down the hallway. And so few of them ever go see the chiropractor, or, get in the cold tub or, all the things that could be really helpful to their high performance. Because when they're on the field, like they have to be thinking, seeing, analyzing, adjusting in the moment. And if they're not in a good physical and mental and emotional state, they can't do that to the best of their ability, which is ultimately actually doing what? Undermining the people that they say they're sacrificing for. And so I think that's a mindset shift that we really need to have in our leadership world, in general.
Talk about your experience with coaches, especially in the football world, where they demand 16-hour days from so many of the people that work for them, and how that is not healthy for anybody.
Yeah, I remember one of the first staffs I worked with way back in the day when I was still in grad school, and they it was a small D1 school in the Northeast, and I remember they had like some young coaches and then some guys that had coached for 40 years, and so the young coaches were like, "Man, we have this thing where it's like a badge of honor who's the last one that leaves the office." But I like walk by some of these old coaches' offices and they're just sitting there watching ESPN. Like, what are we doing? Like, this isn't effective for anybody. And so I just think in even in the pros, it's like we have more technology and more resources to analyze game film than we ever have. And yet we spend more time doing those things than we ever have. And I just think there's a a law of diminishing returns, and it certainly is in human high performance at the coaching and the leadership level. And so one of the things that I think Coach Kelly does a really good job with his staff is that, he's got a rhythm to the calendar year, and it's demanding. Coaching is a demanding job. Recruiting, film study, being with guys at the college level, a lot of developmental stuff. But he's got a really good calendar that he sticks to that gives his coaches downtime, and it's consistent, and coaches really appreciate that. Like they know in January that they can take some time with their families in July, and they're not going to get a call the week before they're told they're off that, oh, kidding, we need to be in the office, And I think that really says a lot about Coach Kelly's leadership, but it also frees these coaches to enjoy their job. Like we had one coach that's with us now, and I asked him like, hey, how's it in Coach Kelly's system for you? And he goes, I forgot how much I loved coaching, because where I came from was so grueling that I was just exhausted and beat down all the time. And it's like, you put it on because you have to for your guys, but to not have to spend the additional energy to try to put that facade on and energize yourself before practice every day, it's amazing because it's already hard enough. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be grueling regardless. Why do we have to make it harder? So I would just really encourage leaders to understand how humans actually perform their best and figure out a good rhythm and a system that works for you that then you can cultivate for the rest of your staff, because it's important.
I don't think a lot of coaches realize how much self-care can lead to better performance and mind, body, and spirit care, where you feel you've got your glasses full and you cannot give what you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens over a period of time is coaches, their glasses get emptier and emptier, and they have less to give. And there's a disconnect between the staffs, and there's a disconnection between the players and the coaches. And I think the one thing that seeing representing coaches and representing players, the the thing that I see that I don't think either side sees is the erosion of respect that takes place when the coaches are saying to do something and they're not doing it. So they're living a hypocritical life, and they're asking these players, they're demanding more than they need to demand.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting, especially the assistants, are being demanded more than they have. And so there's just, everybody's walking around with, almost like a shadow of themselves.
Yeah.
By the time November hits, it's really a shit show.
100%. And it is such an interesting balance. We have a phrase that we use all the time because we talk a lot about positive coaching and the environment that we're going to be in. And positive coaching is not soft. It's not fluffy. It's not holding people accountable. But positive coaching is about being demanding without being demeaning. And there's a difference. And just like the hours add up, so does the language and the communication style that can often happen among staffs, and avoidance of conflict, and gossip that can happen, and just general complaining that starts to creep in when people get tired. And it happens with the guys, it happens in the locker room, and coaches understand that. But we also need to recognize that it happens in the coach's suite too. And all of those things undermine the goal, which is to win. And so if the goal is to win, then we need to look at the whole system, and organizationally, how are we communicating? What are our systems of accountability? What's the vision? What's the mission? What's the process? Why are we doing what we do? And if we don't stay connected to those things, there's a really interesting model called the dream resonance model. And basically it's this cycle that people go through where it's like when you have a dream, right? And that dream and that passion drives the work. And when you work, you get the outcome, right? And then you remind yourself of the dream because it takes more work, and it becomes this cycle. But a lot of times people start to just get in the work outcome loop, and they never step back to remind themselves, why are you coaching? Why do you do what you do? Why do you love this? Why do you love the game? Because you just get in the groove of wake up every day, go to the training room, go to meetings, go to practice, go to the training room, go to meetings, eat, go to more meetings, go to bed, wake up and do it again. And so, being able to revisit that dream and connect to that purpose, to your point of why we do what we do and our intentions here, is a really powerful refueling mechanism for leaders and coaches, and for athletes,
I love that. I see it all the time. Coaches are devoid of passion. They're devoid of purpose. They have diminished. They have diminished impact when they're in that state of mind. Yeah. And so really what it should be is about your purpose and your impact, right? Share with us, I listened to your TEDx talk last night. Kind of share with us your framework, your philosophy about a championship mindset.
Yeah, similar to what we just talked about in terms of how repeated thoughts build mindsets. And, the brain is not a muscle in the scientific sense, but it functions like a muscle in the extent that the parts of it that we use grow and get stronger, and the parts of it that we don't get weaker. And so building championship mindsets is really looking at every situation or scenario that you might find yourself in, and thinking about how you're thinking about it, and making sure that you're repeating thoughts about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it, and specific moments like we talked about, pressure before, or failure, or success. How are you thinking about those moments, and are those thought patterns aligned with how champions view them, or are they not? Some research in brain science is actually showing us that 75 to 98% of all mental and physical health issues are caused due to our thought life. So 75 to 98% of mental and physical health issues are caused due to our thought life, because again, that rewiring of the brain sends electrical signals through your body. And if those are anxious, pessimistic, fearful, stressed thoughts, that's sending all of that through your body. And then conversely, like if we look at the flip side of that, then that means that 2 to 25% of those issues are caused due to our genes or the environment, right? And so we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And we do that by recognizing, what we're thinking about. Is it helpful? And if it's not, rewiring your brain by changing those thought patterns into more helpful, productive, positive thoughts. And that's really the essence, I think, of building championship mindsets, recognizing the unproductive, unhealthy mindsets you've built up over time, like we talked earlier, from wherever they might have come, and then starting to rewire your brain. Because again, the brain is like a muscle. When we stop lifting weights, our muscles get smaller. When we stop repping those negative, unproductive ways of thinking and start repping new ones, then that's when we start to dissipate or break down the unhelpful mindsets and build those championship mindsets.
I 1000% agree with everything you said, but here's my challenge. I'm sitting there listening to this, watching today on this podcast, and I'm going, how? How do I do this? Where do I start? Let's say, for example, I'm a high school athlete or I'm an entrepreneur that's building a business, and I know I'm struggling. I know my mental game isn't as strong as some other parts of my game. Where do I start? What's the first thing I do to rewire my brain?
It's a good question. Well, and everybody wants it to be easy, right? Like, just like we all wish we could walk into the gym on January 1st, work out, and then be like, all right, let's go. I'm ready for the year.
Absolutely.
We laugh because we know, that doesn't work. And the same is true with our brain. And so if you really want to change, like, you got to put a plan in place and train your brain like you train your body. Over my shoulder, if you're watching this, is a copy of my book. It's called Winning the Mental Game, the playbook for building championship mindsets. And Craig, that was one of the things when I first started working with individual clients. They would come and be like, okay, I want to work on my confidence. And then you get like 3 sessions in and you're like, wow, you don't really have a confidence problem. You have an emotional control problem. And because you don't know how to manage your emotions, you're not confident at the point of execution, or I want to work on my focus. And about 3 sessions in, I don't know what it is about 3 sessions, but that's when you start to figure out what's actually going on. I realized, like, wow, it's not really a focus problem. It's an awareness problem. Like, you're so unaware of what's going on inside of you and around you that you don't know what to focus on in the moment. And so that's what made me step back to really think about what goes into a solid mental game. And so this is a playbook of 8 mental plays that build on each other, that is sort of sequential in nature, that really help give people a holistic look at what goes into winning the mental game. And it's comprised of some of the science in every chapter. There's stories in every chapter. And at the end of every chapter, there's actual mindset training or things that people can do to raise their awareness. Because play number 1 is awareness, because you have to be aware before you enhance, right? Then we go to play number 2 and motivation. And so it really helps you discover, what are my actual underlying motivations, the things that drive me. And then we go to confidence, and then emotional mastery, and then attentional control, mental rehearsal. And we end and play 8 with routines. And so people really, it's an investment in understanding how your brain works and then training it in a way that builds that complete mental game. Because it's never really one thing. It's always sort of a combination of that. And as you start to put these 8 plays together, now you start to be able to problem solve in the moment, to adapt in the moment mentally, and to be able to leverage some of these tools to apply in the moment based on what's in front of you, just like you would in a football game when the play breaks down and you have to understand the game. So, when your receiver breaks off, if the linebacker bites and he turns upfield, then you can hit him, right? But if the receiver doesn't understand how the game works and the quarterback doesn't understand how the game works, then he keeps cutting across the flat and the play breaks down, the quarterback scrambles, and you get a loss of yards. So that happens to our mental game all the time. And I think that where people start is, first of all, your thoughts matter. Start being aware of what you're thinking about and replacing those unhelpful, unproductive, negative thoughts with right, positive, productive thoughts. And just start there, of those mental reps of your thoughts. and the next step would be writing down those mindsets, unhelpful, unproductive mindsets, those repeated thoughts that you have. And what do you want to think instead? Making a list on the other side. And then the more holistic work would be really starting to understand these plays and how the mental game works in totality. But that's what I would say. Step one, recognize the importance and power of thoughts, that you have to choose and change them. As you become aware of thoughts, replace them with better, helpful, more helpful thoughts. Then move on to understanding those mindsets that we talked about, and which ones are helping you and which ones are hurting you, and start to rewire the unhelpful ones. And then, that third step is really, okay, now that you're starting to gain a little bit more control over the thought life, now let's really start to dive into to laying that solid mental performance foundation that will give us the mental flexibility that we need to navigate a very ambiguous environment like a sport game or life.
I'm going to take this from the perspective of being a quarterback, and and I'm going to just focus on awareness. That's it. I think what most quarterbacks do, if let's say, for example, they're the starter and they throw a couple picks or they throw an interception and come off the sidelines, and coaches MFing them up one side, down the other, and their teammates are ignoring them, or the receivers are complaining that, hey, if you'd thrown it to me, I would have caught it and we got a touchdown, but you threw it in double coverage. They feel shame. They feel embarrassment. They feel regret. They have all these like emotional connections to their performance. Typically, awareness isn't one of them, especially in the beginning. So how do you coach awareness? Like, more specifically, like you're coaching me and I'm that quarterback, and let's say I'm playing college ball, and I'm looking over my shoulder because I started last year, but this year they brought in some hotshot portal kid or some freshman that's a 5-star, and it's not feeling the same. I'm not feeling the same love connection with my coach. I'm feeling like the coach is coaching the other guys to take my place more than he's coaching me to be better. How does awareness, like, I know it's kind of a crazy question, but how do you help people become aware?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. One, that's the importance of a positive coaching environment. And, Coach Kelly and I talk a lot about this. I mean, if many people that follow college sport, if they know Coach Kelly, they'll be like, oh, he's crazy, and they just see this vision of Brian Kelly on the sideline with a bright red face, and former players will agree with that. And when we first started working together, we started talking about how the brain in a positive state thinks more clearly, thinks more creatively, and it problem solves better. So when do we want our guys thinking positive? I mean, all the time, for sure. But for sure, when things are going wrong, right? And so, because we need them to problem solve, to think creatively, and to execute. And yet, when guys come off the sideline and they get MF'd up and down one way or another and ask, well, how are you even playing college football? Which I've heard coaches yell, guess what now they're thinking about? I don't know why I'm playing college football. I suck. Like, I can't do X, Y, and Z. And then their emotions, and then their physiological response. And then what do? Next drive, little slap on the ass and be like, all right, go get them, and like for the last 3.5 minutes, they've been just beating themselves up mentally. And so, when Coach Kelly learned all of this stuff, he was like, got it. Need to change how I communicate. And he has. And so now that doesn't mean he's not demanding. That doesn't mean he's not intense, but he's not demeaning. And so ask now, instead of like, I can't believe you XYZ. Of course you need to see ABC, right? It's what did you see? Tell me what you saw. We've looked at this a million times. What did you see out there? And so asking better questions, and the quarterback can then give feedback of like, man, I saw the linebacker drop down, but I didn't see the safety coming down as well. And so now you can start to see where he got hung up in his progression. And now you can coach that better. That raises awareness, right? But let's say we're not blessed to be on a staff that's even thinking about this kind of stuff or open to hear it. How do I, as an individual, handle this? One of the tools that we and things that we encourage our athletes to do is simply a well, better, learned. What are 3 things that are going well? What are 2 things that need to go better? And what's one thing you've learned about yourself? And we encourage them to start doing that every day at practice. What are 3 things that went well today? Because you could have had a great practice or a horrible practice, but there was at least 3 things that went well. Then what are 2 things that you need to do better? Again, great practice, bad practice. You can still get better. And what's one thing you learned about yourself as a man or as a competitor? That gets to that identity that we talked about earlier. And so once they start getting in the habit of doing that, then we add another element. What went well today and why? Man, I felt strong all the way through a 24 period practice. Why? Man, I got good sleep. I was hydrated. I ate twice today before practice instead of skipping a meal, right? Good. Now we know why, so we can replicate that. What did you need to do better today? I didn't get in and out of my back pedal well today. Why? I wore the wrong cleats. Great. You wore the wrong cleats given what the field conditions were like out there. And so then what'd you learn about yourself? Man, I learned that even though I wasn't getting in and out of my back pedal, I was able, because I'm really fast and I've got, I can close short distances. I was able to make up ground. Well, you know what? That's good to know, because then on days or a game when the weather's bad and you're kind of slipping, what do a lot of players do? Oh man, it's my cleats. F it. You got those cleats on. We're here right now. Guess what? You know that you can make up ground because you're quick. Okay. So lean into that. So, but we got to get guys doing that over and over and over so that in those moments they get better. That raises their awareness of understanding why things are going well for them, why things are not going well for them, and helps them attribute that success and failure to right things versus just, I'm really good or I suck, which is, I think people don't say that, but that's what we're thinking as an athlete. Oh, I won today because I'm good. I'm better than you. Well, then the day that you don't win, what does that say? I'm not good. I'm not better than you. So that's that volatility that we see in high performers. And so that's a really simple thing that I think people can do to start to raise their awareness, physically, technically, tactically, and mentally.
Well, what I heard you say, and I listened intently, was journal. I need you to journal. I need you to do a debriefing after every competition or every practice. And then you highlighted 6 situations, 3, 2, and 1. 3 really, really good, and 1 that you could have did better, and 2 in between. The other part that I've learned is that and I don't know if this is scientific or not, but it's what I've learned. Our emotions become our memories.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think back to when you played high school soccer and college soccer, you only remember a few moments. But I dare to say that the only moments you remember are the ones that were emotional. Like when you got hurt, or when you got cut, or when you got, you got recognized, or you scored the winning goal. You don't remember the ones in between. So when players practice, they only remember the ones where somebody said something to them like, "Hey, great play." Yeah. Or the coach is cussing them out or pulling them out of the game or out of the scrimmage or whatever it might be. And then the other part of it is, it's because what we're saying is all the same, but different words.
Yep.
But it's the what and the why, but it's the what and the emotion, and then what impact did that have on you?
Mm-hmm.
So what I see with guys, it's like an avalanche. Once the negative mojo goes, it just keeps coming. How do you stop the avalanche of negativity? Well, one of the ways you do it. How do you do it?
No,
this is
go.
Your podcast.
I'm excited. Go.
Okay. So basically, it's not who you are.
Yeah.
You have to bifurcate who you are from what you do. And if you believe in yourself, just like a golfer, let's stick to football. Let's say you're a quarterback. You have a lot of confidence about your game day operations. You have maybe not as much confidence about your connection with your coach. Maybe you feel like you can throw the comeback better than anybody on the planet, but the skinny post is something that you struggle with. And that's okay. You got different levels of confidence about different things that you do. If you want to have more confidence about the things you don't have as much confidence about, that's your practice plan.
Mm-hmm.
Never, ever touches your belief. It doesn't mess with who you are and your identity. And that's where I think with like NFL guys, once what they do is who they are, they're done.
Yep. 100%.
Because you got amazing athletes on both sides of the ball that are paid lots of money to perform. You're not going to be the best on every play against everybody you play against. So it stands to reason on some plays you're going to win ugly, some plays you're not even going to win. Still not who you are.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's like, what could have gone better in that moment? You need people to actually diagnose what went wrong, because when they do, they realize it's not because of who you are. It's something that you did or didn't do, which then means that your belief should stay intact, right? And all you need to do is make an adjustment on the thing, whatever that is. That's a much less emotional experience than questioning your whole existence in the league, you know?
Yes. And that little voice, I call it the pocket voice, is saying things like, maybe you don't belong. Maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. Maybe that coach was right when he said this. Maybe your teammate that said, hey, man, I had a head coach tell one of my clients, an NFL head coach in an exit meeting at the end of the season, tell my client, you don't look like an NFL player. You don't have a body type consistent with an NFL player, and your skill set's not up to par. Maybe you should look at another career. And 3 days later, that coach was fired. And my client went on to play 9 more years and win a couple Super Bowls and be a 5-time defensive captain. So the bottom line is he didn't receive what the coach was given.
Yep.
So sometimes when the coaches, so one of the things that I tell players is respect and love your coaches all you want. But as soon as they turn on you and they're saying things that are not for you, you don't receive them.
Yep.
Because you're allowing that coach to influence your belief, your identity, and your future.
Yeah. And that's, the brain, the conscious mind has a limited attentional capacity, right? It's kind of like a 12-ounce glass of water. It can only hold so much. And so if we fix our mind on things that are excellent and noble and praiseworthy and right and true and honorable, then like we have the sense of peace, the sense of control about how we operate. And then when the negative, anxious things that aren't aligned, with truth about ourselves or about the moment try to get in, it's easier for it to roll out because that your mental cup is so full, already of the right stuff, of right ways of thinking, of truth about, again, who you are and what you're trying to do and how the league actually works. Like, guess what? You don't have to have a particular kind of body with a particular kind of skill set to be successful in the league. We've got a lot of examples of that. So when somebody gives you information that's contrary to truth, to your point, you don't have to receive it. And so if you've filled your mind with those right things, it's a lot easier to not receive. I'm not saying that's easy to not receive things, but when you're filled with right ways of thinking and you have right mentors and people that are giving you good information about who you are and what you're doing and the environment and the context that you're in, man, it's a lot easier to receive the right things and not the wrong things.
I'm going to give you a concept that I've created through Pro Mindset, and I want you to give me your feedback on it. Yeah. Basically, the opportunity to perform is your stage. You're on stage right now. You're on stage when you're up on a stage. You're on stage when you're on the phone with a coach or FaceTime or Zoom. We have multiple stages. So do players, and so do coaches, and so do business people. And so the concept that I've created is a performance bubble. And the players that I've had that have done the best despite their circumstances all had a performance bubble. And in that performance bubble, they only brought in, it's a mental headspace that's a safe place where you can perform your best. You can get in the zone, you can play free, and you can have peace. And the reason why is because anything that serves you gets to come in. Your dedication, your commitment, your motivation, your belief in yourself, your confidence in your skills, your practice, your like game-like practice, your preparation, your visualization, your purpose, all gets to come in. Your past, your failures, your anxiety, all that stuff. Hey, the weather, the media, the social media, the coach's comments, the threats, anything with your family that's not for you, any conflicts, doesn't get to come in. So now you're in this safe place. So when I step into my performance bubble, I can be my best in the biggest moments and all the moments. And the oxygen that you put in your performance bubble is the oxygen of belief.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other oxygen in there. So if, just like being aware, you have this fleeting thought, and it's like, maybe, this performance bubble isn't going to work. Or, hey, your coach said this, and he's probably going to yank you the first time you throw a bad pass. The first time you throw an incompletion, he's chomping at the bit to put the backup in. Those kind of thoughts. You have to have a release valve. So when that comes in, you go, hey, that's cool, but that's not going to serve me, so I'm going to let you go. It's catch and release.
Yeah.
That way you can control your performance environment. So when the fire gets really hot, doesn't matter. Thoughts on that?
I love it. I mean, I think that what I love about it too is it's such a clear visual, and the brain sees in pictures. That's why people, the brain doesn't have a picture for the word don't. And so, I really challenge coaches when we're teaching and coaching. It's like, okay, just don't step there. Well, okay, what does the brain see? Or don't throw an interception. The brain sees stepping in that spot or throwing the interception. So it's like, we really want to speak in the affirmative, because again, the brain sees in pictures. It's like my golfers. It's like, all right, just don't hit it in the water, and like what happens? Bloop, bloop, right into the water. And so what do we want to happen? Drop it in the fairway. So we see that thing. Like when you're talking about this performance bubble and like oxygen and belief, like I just see a very clear bubble with like a light blue lining, and that it's free in there, and the O2 is strong, and there's almost a levity about it because it's so pure. And what a powerful thing for an athlete to be able to see and to put themselves in as they're learning to manage this thought life and these inputs that are coming into how they operate. So I think it's fabulous.
Well, I've got a client that's doing his pro day in a couple days. And it's like he's built a performance bubble for his pro day. And that's what you've got to do. Now, is it going to work perfectly? Probably not. But he's going to perform so much better because of the exercise of putting himself in that place where he understands that I'm in control. So many athletes feel victim of their circumstances, the environment, their coaches, everything. They don't feel like they're in control. And the performance bubble gives you control.
And control gives us confidence, and that's what we need in these moments where we've got to deliver, because it matters. It does. It matters. And for them, for their futures, for their families. And so I love that. That's powerful.
Amber, what is one thing I didn't ask you that you were hoping I would, that you would like to share about thinking like a champion, winning just your whole purpose in this championship mindset space?
I mean, I just think that whoever's listening, I mean, this applies to everyone, right? And the last several years have been so interesting, since COVID, and in 2020, right? It was an election year, and COVID was happening, and we had a lot of social injustice conversations in our world. And I just saw like there was so much division. It's like you're Republican or you're Democrat, you're black, you're white, you're mask, you're no mask. And it's like so much division in our world. And I just don't believe that that's how humans have been created to live. And so whoever you are and whatever you're doing with your life, like I want you to hear this stuff and know that it's for you, because the beautiful thing about the human brain is it doesn't care what political affiliation, religion, color, socioeconomic status you are. It only matters that you're human. And if we can start to take hold of and integrate the power of our mind into who we are and how we show up every day, it can start to change how we view ourselves, how we view our role in the world. And I think our world just needs more bridge builders and peace givers and light bearers. I think it starts with people leading themselves well by leading their thought life. And so I just want to encourage anybody that might be listening right now that this isn't for athletes and coaches and business leaders. This is for husbands and wives and moms and dads and community members and people that might just be trying to figure out how to take the next step in their lives. And it's for really elite performers that are already awesome at what you do. How do you take the next step in that? And so I would just encourage you again to wherever you're at in your journey and whatever you're doing, how do you tap in a new way and an enlightened, like a more powerful way into this mental game that, you work on with Pro Mindset that we talk about here at Selking Performance Group. And, there's so many resources out there to help people do that. We have a podcast as well called Building Championship Mindsets that can be a resource. And the book I mentioned and then again, all the work that you do, Craig, is so important to help people think right and show up to deliver their best when it matters, because it matters. And I guess the last thing I'll note is that I think our world today, we're having a lot of conversations around mental health. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times when we talk about that, we're talking about mental illness, not actually mental health, and treating a lot of symptoms on things. And so I believe that the work that you do and the things that we help teach people on can help get upstream from some of these mental illnesses that we're seeing in our world, and really, again, teach people how to think right and how to take personal responsibility and accountability for who they are and how they show up to the world. And then one more layer up would be the leadership and coaching environments that leaders are creating for people. So those would be the things that I'd love to leave our listeners with.
Amber, thank you so much. Where can they find you?
Yeah, we're on Twitter or X and Instagram and TikTok on @ChampMindsets. And then you can send me an email directly if you're interested in keynote speaking for an organization or performance coaching, Dr. Selking at selkingperformance.com. And then all of that can be found on our website too at selkingperformance.com.
Thank you so much. You go out and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Craig. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Again, thanks for all the work that you do.
Thank you. It's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a Pro Mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.